This is not going to be your typical how to budget video where I just tell you to write down all your monthly expenses and set that amount aside every month. In today's video, we're going to be taking a different approach to budgeting so you can design your own budget that you can actually stick to. Most budgeting strategies out there take the wrong approach and leave you unable to keep up with it after a few weeks or a few months, so I came up with a different system to reverse engineer this one major problem. Be sure to stick around until the very end because we'll be breaking down my exact budget so you can see how easy it is to use my system in practice. And before I begin, my name is Caleb, and be sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more content just like this. Now let's make a budget. So the whole premise behind my system here is to break all of your expenses down for the entire year into 3 main categories, and then from there we can use that number to figure out how much you need to set aside every single paycheck or every single week depending on how often you get paid. We're essentially going to be working backwards with this method, so instead of taking your monthly income and figuring out how much you have left for each of your bills, we're going to figure out how much all of your bills and expenses are, including literally everything, and then we're going to use that to figure out how much we need to make on a weekly or monthly basis. Using this method here, not only does it account for things that are lifestyle related or habit related, but it also accounts for things that have a fluctuating cost from month to month. So because of this, doing things a little bit backwards, I think actually makes it easier in the long run because you'll create a budget that is realistic for you and you can actually stick to it. So like I said, there's 3 main categories we got here. So we have the recurring expenses, which is bills and subscriptions and fees and stuff like that. Then we have step 2, which is the debts and savings. So that'll be like credit cards, loans, investment contributions, and things of that matter. And then in step 3, we got variable expenses, and these are just the things that have fluctuating costs. So maybe it's your water bill and it's different every month, or your electric bill, or maybe it's things that you only pay for like once a year or once every 6 months. And so this method is going to account for all of this. So now we're going to jump into step 1, which is the recurring expenses, and all of these numbers right here are just examples, so bear with me. So pretend we got rent, internet, phone, insurance, and electricity. This all totals to about $1,000 a month. And then we also have a Netflix and Disney Plus subscription, plus our iCloud account, which is another $30. And then we have these annual fees down here. So all of these things were monthly, but then these 3, Amazon Prime, the credit card annual fee, and the car tags, those are only annual expenses. So that comes out to about $325 a year, and then we have the $1,000 a month, like I said. So now you're probably wondering, well, if we only have the yearly amount and the monthly amount, how do we combine that into one number? So on this next slide here, we take $1,000 a month, that comes out to about $12,000 a year, right? So then you just add that 325 we got from the previous screen down here, and now we have the new total, which is $12,325 a year. So if you break this down, this comes out to about $1,000 or $1,027 per month, and then $237 per week, because we're just dividing that 12,000 number by either 12 months or 52 weeks to get these totals over here. So now that we have the total per week for our step 1, which is 237, now we can add that to step 2, which is the debts and savings. So here in this example, we have 2 things here. We have the car payment, and then we have the credit card financing. So this is going to cost you $220 a month for 60 months, and then the other one is going to be $50 a month for 12 months. So the important part here is to account for the length of time that you're going to be paying this as well, and I'm going to add that into this in just a second. And then down here we also have the Roth IRA and the 401k contributions because this counts as savings, and then we're going to use $10 a day for this example, and then $70 a week for the 401k part. So we're going to ignore this here at the bottom for just a second, and we're just going to focus on the car payment and the credit card financing. So remember in step 1 how we had the $12,325 per year number? So now in step 2, we're going to figure out how much the car payment and the credit card financing is going to cost you every year. So we have $220 a month and then $50 a month, just like I showed on the previous screen. And then we multiply that by the amount of months that you're going to be paying this off. So we have 60 and 12 months respectively, which comes out to 5 years and 1 year respectively. So this comes out to a total amount owed of $13,200 for the car and $600 for the credit cards. So from here, we take the yellow number here and we divide it by the blue number right there. So $13,200 divided by 5 comes out to about $2,640 a year. And then the 600 divided by 1 is, of course, 600. So now we have to add both of these numbers to the yearly total from step 1. So now that we have the total from step 1 and we have the 2 totals from step 2, we can add those all together to figure out how much we owe per year so far. So that would be $15,560 $265 per year. And then down here, now you can make this cool little graph, and this is what I mentioned a second ago about why you want to know how long you're going to be paying stuff off for, is because then you can basically make this little chart and it'll tell you how much your expenses are going to change and go up or down over the course of multiple years. So as you can see here, because of this $600 amount for the credit cards only being a thing for 12 months, we're only having to pay that amount for 1 year. And then after that, from years 2 to 5, it actually drops down to $14,965 a year. And then after year 5, from year 6 onward, we're only paying that original $12,325 amount, because now we have both the card and the car payment out of the way. So that's just another kind of cool way that you can look at it, because I know that some people have like multiple credit cards or multiple types of loans and they all have different expiration dates. So if you want to create something like this, it gives you a little bit of a better picture as to how much money you can expect to have left over a longer time span. So all three of those numbers from the previous screen were just the yearly amounts. So now I broke it down into weekly amounts. So you're going to be starting out with the $15,000, which comes out to $299 a week for the first year. And then years 2 to 5, you'd be looking at $288 a week in expenses. And then year 6 onward would be back to that $237 per week number. So now that we have this new total here of $299 per week from steps 1 and 2, we can add that to step 3, which is the variable expenses. So this is going to be stuff like food and eating out. This is going to be gas and commuting. And then we have like fun expenses, so like going to the movie theater. And then we have the consumables, which is going to be groceries that aren't food, so like toilet paper, shampoo, soap, and things like that. So now I just estimated a rough amount of what I would probably spend a week on these things. So it'd be about 50 bucks a week on food, 25 bucks a week in gas, 30 bucks a week for fun, and then $20 a week for the other consumable stuff. So that comes out to about $125 per week. And then as you can see, we have the corresponding yearly totals right over here. So we have $2,600, $1,300, $1,560 and $1,040, and that comes out to $6,500 per year. So now that we have the $6,500 amount, we can add that to the $15,000 amount from steps 1 and 2. And then adding step 3 to that, now we're looking at $22,065 per year, and that comes out to $424 per week. So then from here, you can kind of look at it this way. So then you take your income, which hypothetically is $30,000 a year, and that is broken down into $577 per week. Now you can really see kind of like the difference between how much your expenses are and then how much you're actually making. So what's cool about breaking the number down this far is we've already accounted for mostly everything that you can imagine being in a budget. So we've accounted for your monthly expenses, your yearly expenses, we've accounted for all your debts of various time frames, we also accounted for your fun and food expenses, and then maybe if you have a hobby that costs money on a regular basis, you can include that in step 3 as well. So it really doesn't matter that much if there is not a huge difference between these two numbers, because we pretty much accounted for everything that is important or realistic or reasonable. Now the only thing we have left to do is figure out how much of this difference between these two numbers can we use for our investments like the Roth IRA and the 401k. So like I said before, we were going to come back to that. Now we're going to add those two things in. So essentially we have $577 a week that we're making on average, and then we have $424 a week that we're having to spend on average. So that leaves us with another $153 per week left over. So now we can add back in the Roth IRA and the 401k contributions. So hypothetically, let's say that I want to invest $10 a day into the Roth, and then I want to invest $70 a week into the 401k. So now we can just take the leftover amount that I showed you before of $153 a week, and we can take out the contributions from that to get the new grand total. So now we have $70 a week for the 401k, and then $10 a day comes out to $70 a week as well for the Roth IRA. So we take those both away from $153, and now we have $13 a week extra, and this is after absolutely everything. So I think with a really good budget, if you're accounting for all your investment contributions as well, you should really have this number down to as low as you can possibly get it. Because the higher this number is right here, the more money that you have just sitting in a checking account, wasting away to inflation, and you should be investing it. So if this number is pretty high, then figure out how you can be investing more of that money. Or you can just use this amount as like a little bit of a buffer every week. So if you want to like eat out one extra time, or maybe you want to get like more expensive soap for your dishes one week or something, that's kind of where this can come from. So to sum everything up, now we've totaled all things from steps 1, 2, and 3. So we had the recurring expenses, which will be your bills and subscriptions. Step 2 was the debts and savings. So this will be the credit cards, the loans, your car payment, your mortgage, and all your investment contributions. And then we have step 3, which was the variable expenses. This is anything with a fluctuating cost, so it could be your water or electric bill if they go up and down every month, or it could be things like your fun expenses and your food expenses, and we already talked about all that. So let's jump into the do's and don'ts of using this type of budget. So the things that you do want to do is track your spending still. So above all else, you still need to be writing everything down with this method. You can even separate it so you don't have to calculate everything at first, but you can make a list of like what are your monthly expenses, then make a separate list of your yearly expenses. And the next important thing to do here is to automate everything you can. So with this, I'm not just talking about like bill pay or auto pay for your bills. I'm also talking about having all your investment contributions automated, as well as seeing if your bank can actually take the amount that you need every month for your expenses and just take that straight out of your paycheck that's direct deposited. So that way you can put that amount in like a separate account or whatever, and then you can have all of these bills and stuff come out of that. That way your leftover amount is always separate, and then you're never able to even touch the amount that you actually need at a bare minimum. The next thing that you should do is to recalculate when things change. So maybe one of your bills changes in price, maybe your rent went up, maybe you want to change the frequency that you're investing in your Roth account. So when these things happen, with this method, it is really easy to recalculate because you just take that previous total and then you figure out what the new total is for the variable that's changing, and then you just figure out what that new weekly amount is. So that's really the goal here, is to figure out what your yearly amount is going to cost you when anything changes, and then break that down into a weekly amount that you can set aside. The last important thing to do here is to over budget for your variable expenses and to keep it realistic. So if you're someone who works kind of far away from your house, you don't want to be under budgeting for your gas. You know what I mean? Like, you need to really consider like what is realistic for your gas usage and what you also use just into your day-to-day life. Like, are you someone who goes on late night drives all the time? Because if that's the case, then you should also be budgeting for that too. And then for food and stuff, like, you can try your best to get those expenses down if you want to do that. But if you're someone who eats out like 3 times a week, then you should also be budgeting for that as well and keeping it realistic, because then you actually know what you need to maintain your current position, and you don't need to like struggle to like keep up with this budget that's like overly strict. So let's move on to the don'ts here. The first one would be to don't ignore your financial goals. So like I said, you want that number that you have left over to be like as low as possible, but you also don't want to be ignoring other things that are part of the picture. So maybe you're saving up for like a down payment on a house, or you're trying to build up an emergency savings, or you're trying to save up for like an expensive purchase. So if you have any of those things, you need to implement those into your budget as well. The whole point of this budget is to account for literally everything that you can think of. The second thing that you don't want to do is neglect your needs. So just like I said with the food and gas, like if you have a hobby that costs a certain amount every week, like maybe you go on hikes or you go fishing or something, or you go bike, then those are kind of like your needs because that's part of your hobby and your lifestyle. So you should be budgeting for stuff like that. So like maybe, you know, every 6 months you need to get new tires for your bike or something like that because they get worn down. So figure out how much those tires cost and implement that into your weekly expenses like this. That way when those expenses come up, that only happen once or twice a year, you've already been putting money aside every week for that. That way you don't need to pay like double in expenses one particular month. The next thing you don't want to do here is set yourself up for failure. So just like I said on the previous screen, you want to be keeping it realistic, and you don't want to make it so hard for you to keep up with this budget that you're gonna not stick to it after a few weeks. And that goes right into the last thing here, which is you don't want to create an overly strict budget, because if you do that, then you're defeating the whole purpose of making a budget in the first place. The number one goal here is to create a realistic budget that you can actually stick to, just like I said in the beginning of this video. So if you can't keep up with it, you're going to lose motivation to continue, which is bad. So you need to find a budget that fits your personality. That is the key thing here. So like, do you like to go to the movie theater with your family every week? Budget for that. Budget for your hobbies, budget for your road trips. Maybe you have a date night with your partner every week or something like that. You need a budget for that as well. And then there's other like lifestyle stuff, so like going on bike rides, or maybe you're a skateboarder and you break your board all the time and you need to buy new ones. Or maybe like you like to collect shoes even. That could be considered a lifestyle thing. So all of those things that you can think of, figure out a way to quantify it and add that to your budget and figure out the weekly amount that you need for that. That way, when those one-time expenses come up, you actually have the money for it already. Now, finally, I'm going to give you guys a real-life example of my exact budget right now. I want to show you guys what a realistic example of this budget actually looks like based on real numbers. So bear with me here because I simplified things a little bit in order to minimize how many slides I had, but here we go. So right now I pay $648 combined for rent, garage, and garbage expenses. I pay $60 for electric and water. Now both of these are actually variable expenses here, but I over budget for them. That way I don't need to have them be variable expenses. So really, like, electric and water cost me between like $45 and $50 a month, but I budget for $60, that way I never have to worry about it. So $60 is like the highest it's ever been. Next we have the $85, which is for the internet and the phone. Then we got $65 a month for car and rental insurance. Then we got $40 a month for dental and health insurance. And then for other monthly expenses and fees, we have about $6. So this would be my Acorns subscription and then my iCloud storage. So this comes out to about $904 per month in bills and subscriptions. So now we can add that to step 2 in just a second here, but we did forget the annual bills. So we have the $904 for the monthly bills. And then down here, I calculated that I have $682 in yearly expenses. So I have like my car tags or like my domain names that I own where I only get billed once a year for these things. And this comes out to about $57 extra per month if you were to divide the 682 by the 12 months in the year. So then we can just add that number right up here to the 904, and then we get the $961 amount for the total monthly expenses, accounting for our monthly and our yearly bills. Now moving on to step 2 here, we have the credit cards, the loan, and then we have the investments. So basically for my credit cards, I calculated that I owe about $800 on the credit cards over the course of the next 6 months, and then I owe about $540 on a loan that I have that I need to pay off in the next 3 months. And so breaking that down, that comes out to $133 per month and $180 per month respectively. Then instead of skipping the investments, I'm just going to add them in right now. So I want to invest $400 a month into my Roth and crypto, and that comes out to about $10 a day for the Roth or $300 a month. And then I want to invest $100 a month into crypto. So those are my current goals. Now, if we add these 3 numbers together at the very end down here, we get $713 per month total for the credit cards, the loans, and the investments. So that is step 2. Now we can add step 1 and step 2 together. So we have $961 for the bills, $713 for the debts. That's step 1 and step 2. And now we need to just add in the variable expenses here. So I'm just going to use the example that I gave earlier for the food and gas and fun and consumables, because those numbers are, roughly speaking, what I actually need currently. So I'm just going to use that for an example. It's $125 a week, like I said, or $500 a month. So now we can just add this $500 a month up here to these other 2, and we can get the grand total. So that'll bring us to $2,174 as a grand total on a monthly basis, and that comes out to $26,088 per year, or $502 per week. Now what I make every month is about $2,650, or $31,800 per year, or $612 per week. So if I take away the $502 from the $612 that I'm making, I basically have $110 left over. So this $110 per week extra that I have right here tells me that I have about $450 per month that I could either be investing more of, or I could be paying down my debts quicker. So that's kind of what that number tells me. And then if I move on to here, this is kind of the conclusion of it all, so let me explain this. So basically this chart is showing the exact same information, but it's also accounting for how long I'm going to be paying off these debts for. So for months 1 to 3, I'm paying off the credit card and the loan. And then for months 4 to 6, I'm just paying the credit card. And then months 7 and up, I'm just paying only the expenses because I'll have no more debts left over. So now in the expenses column, you can kind of see how these expenses are changing over time. So on a monthly basis, we're starting out with $2,174. And after we get the loan out of the way, I'm only going to be owing $1,994. And then after all of the debts out of the way, it's only going to be $1,861. And that comes out to $502, $460, and $429 per week. So as you can see, there's kind of like a big difference between these two numbers once I get those debts paid off. So this is even more incentive to pay the debts off sooner, so I can just get to this lower amount. So this is another way of looking at it that kind of motivates you to pay your debts down quicker, which is one reason that I like doing it like this. And then if you look at the weekly amount too, Like there's another, $70 per week right there that I'm missing out on by having these debts. So now in this last column here, it's showing me the amount of money that I'm gonna have after my income. So this is the number where it's like my income minus my expenses, and the answer to that is gonna be the numbers that it shows here. So if you take my income amount of $2,650 and take away $2,100 from that, you get $476 a month or $110 a week. And then if we jump down to having the no debts right here, if you take my monthly income of $2,650 and take away $1,861 from that, now we have $789 left over every month, or $182 per week. So now we can see the same $70 difference that we saw between these two numbers. And the way I'm basically calculating this is I'll take my monthly amount for all the bills, and then I'll multiply that by 12 months to get the yearly expense amount, and then I divide that number by 52 to get the weekly amount. Now, the important part here is you want to cross through the 1 year calculation. If you just go from 1 month to weeks or whatever, you're not going to get as accurate of a number, because there is 4 weeks in a month, but that only accounts for 28 days. It doesn't account for the months that have like 30 days or 31 days or 28 days. So if you calculate the year amount first before you break it down into a weekly amount, you're gonna get a much more accurate number. So I know this was kind of a longer video, but I hope it made sense for you guys and shows you a new way of looking at your bills. That way you can break it down in a way that's actually realistic for you to stick with. And I really like this method of working backwards just for this one reason, because a lot of people start out with their monthly income and they try and like divide that up amongst all of their expenses, but I find it to be much easier if you just figure out where your expenses are and figure out what that weekly or monthly amount is, and use that to figure out how much you need to be making from your job. So maybe you're even like a DoorDash person, or you work at a restaurant as a server, then you can use these amounts as like the bare minimum goal you need to hit. And then if you make more than that on your paycheck, then you just know that you have more money left over. So I hope you guys learned something new in today's video, and if you did, please leave a like down below. I hope this thought process kind of shed some light onto different ways that you could be looking at making a budget. And if you want to see more content just like this, please hit that subscribe button down below as well with a little notification bell next to it. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.